next up is a very big screaming handbrake turn. This is German single malt.薩拉摩爾is the name of the whiskey from Distillery Ralph Hauer in Germany, and this is a reasonably new distiller who been producing for about 10 years, and he got in touch with me, just saying, would you like to try some cask samples, and think you'd probably quite like this if you like. He specifically mentioned Smogan, I sort of ears pricked up because I love Smogan, so I thought, okay, let's have a try. And he sent some cask samples over, and I was just really impressed by this like very vivid, pure, powerful, sharp peat bomb of a whiskey. And he had two whiskeys, so one just traditional peat smoked barley, and one made with German beechwood smoked malt, they were reasonably similar, but then this with a very clear, more kind of herbal accent on the piece, so the beechwood smoked one. But we're having edition A tonight, which is actually, I can't remember which is which.
This is the peat smoked one.
Yeah, so this is the standard peat smoked one, so sort of fairly more traditional. But what I loved about this was just the purity of the peat flavor. So it's just like sharp, vivid, and this really like salty, coastal, quite savory, dry, crisp peat smoke about it, and really powerful as well, like just a proper young peat bomb. And we reduced these by quite a few degrees. They were up well above 60, and we put them down at 57.1, which I just thought was, and this is another strength, like 48.5 is one of my favorites. We use it a lot. I think it works pretty universally well for most spirits. Certainly, it's one of the best strengths that preserves power, like real power. And if you've brought it down to that point from, above 60, whatever, you tend to get more freshness in the whiskey as well. So it shows really well. And I think that doing that also creates a product which is going to travel better in bottle in the years ahead. I'm a believer that whiskey does continue to change a bit and evolve a bit in bottle slowly over the decades. And doing bottling now, my background is obviously old and rare whiskeys or old bottles and working in auctions and things like that. Tasted a lot of these old bottles. I'm very aware of what shows well after it's been in glass for many years. And you see patterns that, proper bottling strengths, clean bottlings, minimal intervention, certain types of malt whiskey, whatever, certain profiles, certain distilleries that tend to just do really well in glass and stand up to the time in glass very well. And so that's what I'm thinking about when I'm doing my own bottlings now, is what are drinkers going to experience, 50 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever. What's their experience of this whiskey likely to be? What can we do to try and make sure that, even someone that opens one of these bottles decades from now is still going to have a great experience? So that's something that we factor in, and that, this is a very good example of that, bottling with a few degrees, 57.1, keeps all the power, but just shows in a bit more, fresher way. So, so a few more comments here. Yeah, lovely, sweet, musky wood smoke. That I agree with that. That kind of musky kind of, slightly, it's like sort of slightly leathery peatiness about it. And I did find this one had a nice little herbal undertone, like sort of herbal medicinal, like it's like mercurochrome and cough syrup and things like that. I'm curious to hear what people think about this, because it's probably outside most people's experience, this whiskey. It's not commonly seen in the UK. And I think there's only been one other company that did a bottling of their stuff. But it's certainly one of the best German whiskies I've tried. There's loads of distilleries in Germany, but not all of them are very, not super consistent.
I think it's a drop of water really well. I've just added a little drop of water to it. I think that's...
Yeah, interesting comment here from Will as well about old blends. I mean, blends definitely do not travel in bottle as well as malts. I think it's just something about the much lighter base spirit grain, that makes them more fragile and susceptible to things like light and changing temperature and oxidization, all these things. So you far more commonly find blends from the 70s or 60s have got like really old bottle flavors and like very vegetal cardboardy flavors. But then when you go back to the 50s and 40s, when those same blends had much higher malt components, they're actually much more full-bodied whiskies that have survived better. And it's almost like the grain whiskey just acts as a sponge for the malt and just absorbs and assimilates the kind of malt whiskey flavors. So it's really interesting, like trying like Shivers is, you know, or Bell's a good example. Try old Bell's from the 50s versus a 70s bottling, and it's, you know, chalk and cheese completely. So yeah, bit of a dovetail there. Reminds me of an Islay whiskey called Scarabus, saline iodine. What bottling is that? I don't know if I know Scarabus.
They were bottling that at Ardnahoe, weren't they, before they had produced their own whiskey, Scarabus?
So this was
So it was a Hunter Lang bottling.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So probably Kalila.
Well, Kalila or Lefroy.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Kalila is probably the closest thing in Scotland that this reminds me of, is like that, just pure, briny, sharp, ashy peat, mineral, citrus, kind of refill matured Kalila.
I'm getting a little more citrus on the nose now that I put water in it, I think. So yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think it does get a bit more playful, but it really reminds me. It did really remind me of Smogan. Like we've done a couple of bottlings of Smogan, and that kind of very pure, sharp refill profile, or even first fill barrel profile, that definitely it shares something of that style. And these being first fill barrels, it was a nice age, 8 years old, worked well. And also another aspect about these is that where it's matured in Germany is going to be warmer than in Scotland, so you will start to get a slightly more interesting influence from the different maturation climate, different temperature. Yeah. So the other one compared to this is, I would say, is more towards like cured meats and herbal and sort of more in these kind of heavy cough syrup and old herbal liqueur notes, and it's really quite a fascinating comparison. But you still get that underlying, like, you know, very big sort of powerful smoky DNA about it. Yeah, so very good whiskies if you like something a bit different. And like, where do we think? So what's this? Where are they getting their peated malt from? So the peat smoked one, I believe, was malt sourced from Scotland, and I think they would have bought it from. I need to go away and check. Actually, I can't remember. I used to know, but it's been a while since we bottled these, and I've now forgotten. I'm at that age in life where every time I learn something new, it pushes other things out of my brain. I can find out. Salmiak Dutch sweets. Yes, I know those. Like not quite salted licorice, but something sort of slightly salty in sweetie form. Yeah, I totally get that. What's people's reaction to the MÓR so far then? I can't remember if you're a peaty whiskey person, Julia.
I do like a bit of peat. I think this is definitely on the saltier side, which I like.
Yeah, I would say this is even a whiskey, and I'm not normally whiskey and food person, but this is probably a whiskey that would do some food, like most shit. Like I had really good seafood dinner last night, and just thinking about this makes me think this would be kind of perfect with something like that. It's probably one of those whiskeys you could drizzle on an oyster. You're into oysters, which I'm not, but yeah, that seems like the sort of thing I can imagine large European people doing on Islay during the festival.
I think I was introduced recently to blue cheese with peaty whiskey. Blue cheese is a thing that I didn't eat until just recently, and I only do when I'm drinking smoky whiskey. It's delightful.
There's a cocktail place in Shrewsbury that does a whiskey cocktail with a wedge of blue cheese on the glass.
Oh my goodness.
Pairs well.
A wedge of blue cheese in the glass, that makes me think of Hamden rum. We bottled Hamden that basically just smells of blue cheese.
And Airfix glue.
Yeah, someone at Talisker tour guide said that it makes no difference where you get peated malt from. Yeah, I mean, that's just demonstrably scientifically wrong, so I don't know what to say there. It's been proven. I mean, even by SWIRI, which Diageo are members of, Scotch Whisky Research Institute, they've had papers by PhD students where they looked at detectable and discernibly different flavors from malt, whiskies made using different peat sources, and it's absolutely detectable. Like you can clearly, get the sense of, this was Islay peat, this was Orkney peat. I mean, Islay and Orkney are the perfect examples I always go to because, Islay peat is more sort of complex makeup in terms of materials. You've got, heather, but also sphagnum and seaweed and different mosses and things. And then Orkney peat is just pure heather. And the different profiles you get when they're properly kilned and properly incepted into the whiskies, you get absolutely incredible, distinctive flavor profiles. Like that's probably some of the most memorable whiskies I've ever tasted have been Old Highland Parks and Old Lafroigs from the 50s, 40s, that sort of time period. It's just unbelievable, charismatic whiskies. That's the only thing I would say about modern production and modern peat is that with these big centralized maltings, there's many distilleries using peat that's technically from the same source, which creates a certain amount of homogenization in modern whiskey to some extent, which is a shame. I really hope in future we're going to see more distilleries that have their own floor maltings back, or if they do use peat, they use it perhaps in a smaller way, not as much of it, but they use it in a very distinctive way that gives real character to the whiskey. That's the dream, anyway. Very approachable for 8-year-old. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's definitely an easy sipper, despite being a obviously massive peat bomb.
I just went back and had the last sip of the Balblair that I had in my glass, and it's even fruitier now after the smoky Salamore.
It's quite nice. It's quite a diverse range of drams tonight. It's quite interesting going back and forth, because the other thing I think that's a good hallmark of a good whiskey is, like, you can have something like the Balblair and go and have some like big intense powerhouse dram like that Salamore, but you can go back to the Balblair and it still cuts through in the same way that some old bottles, even if they're done at 40%, if they're incredible whiskies, they can still absolutely stand up after a big cast strength dram. That to me is always a sign of like a really good, really charismatic whiskey, is that it'll just cut through always. Maybe we could come up with some kind of marketing campaign. Decadent drinks, whiskies all have that specific quality.
That is the marketing campaign.
Is it? I've not been in that meeting. I've not been invited to that meeting. I don't think it's that team's chat.
Is that one of our unique selling points?
Probably. Well, as we all know, I'm not in charge of marketing, so.
We'll teach you the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Maybe we'll just do all the bottlings next year at 40% as well.
See how well that goes down.
I did want to try doing a bottling that very explicitly used some caramel, because there was another bottler who did use some caramel and gave me a taste of what they'd done with it. They'd done a 40% whiskey with caramel. I was like, holy hell, that tastes pretty good. And it tasted like it was Kalila, but it tasted exactly like 80s Lafroig. And it made me think, how much of Lafroig 10-year-old's personality is actually coming from caramel? It was really quite a, light bulb like moment. So ever since then, I thought, I wonder if I could get away with doing a bottling where we like actually make it about the caramel, but I don't know. I think it would probably backfire and be a complete disaster. So pretty low down my list of harebrained things to try.